Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of an update on who kind of won the offseason so far. Obviously, we are through the bulk of the offseason where a lot of the moves are happening, whether that's roster moves or coaching moves. So we're kind of at a standstill, at least for a little bit here. So I wanted to break down some of the winners for you thus far, but let's get into some spring overreactions. And we'll go to the Big Ten this time around, and we'll probably do another Big Ten one because there's tons of teams that I did not get a chance to get to, but we got some of the big boys in this one. So let's start with Penn State, and let's start with Abdul Carter. I think he is one of the most impressive players in the entire country. I think if you take out Travis Hunter, you'd be really hard pressed to find a more dynamic, more versatile defender in the entire country. That's why they moved him from linebacker to edge rusher this offseason, because he can be anywhere on the field and he'll make plays. You could put him at deep safety and he'd somehow find a way to make a play. The dude is just out of this world talented, and I think that could make for a year that Penn State fans have not seen since Micah Parsons. And I understand that is very lofty goals. Micah Parsons was an absolute game wrecker, both rushing the passer and just blowing up pretty much every single play down after down, but this kid has every ability to be an absolute game wrecker this year. He can rush the passer, he can drop into coverage, makes tons of tackles, can do pretty much everything you need him to do on the field. And on top of all that, he is going to be the emotional leader of this team. He will likely be the guy with the green dot, although they might give it to one of the really talented linebackers they have there as well, because he is on the edge, a little bit harder to communicate, but we'll see what happens there. He did have 6.5 sacks and 10.5 tackles for loss a year ago, so the dude can absolutely rush the passer. He just didn't do it all the time a year ago, and I probably think he'll be in a little bit more of a hybrid spot this year as well, but definitely more pass rushing opportunities, so just give him more opportunities, and he's going to burst onto the scene. I can promise you that. But this Penn State defense, I do think, is going to be very good. That being said, they did lose a ton of players from a year ago, and there is going to be a little bit more emphasis on the big dogs to make a ton of the plays. And Abdul Carter is as big of a dog as they have in that room. So when you had Chop Robinson, the Adisa Isaac, and Kalen King, and Johnny Dixon, and all of these guys that were making remarkable plays across the field, there was less on you, obviously. But now, not that they're going to be bad by any means. I think A.J. Harris is going to be a great player for them in the back end. I think they have plenty of talent on that team. But I do think Abdul Carter will have a little bit more on his shoulders. And I think he's someone that is going to take that in stride. I don't think he's ever going to be someone to shy away from a competition, shy away from a challenge, and this is a big challenge, but I think he's more than capable of doing it. I think the versatility mixed with him just needing to be the guy on this team, I think he's going to be one of, if not the best defensive player in the entire country. I think he will go top 10 in the NFL draft. I can't say enough about this kid. I think he's just out of this world talented and has every ability to not only be a fantastic player this year, but go on and have a remarkable career in the NFL. But let's move on to Michigan and talk about Sherrone Moore, because the big topic of conversation to start the offseason was Jim Harbaugh moving on to the NFL, taking a lot of people with him, and the Michigan program just kind of being in a spot where I'm sure Michigan fans were plenty confident in their guy, no doubt about that, but I do think there was a little bit of worry, right? There's a little bit of a question of, can you keep up what has been going on over the last couple of years, because it's very important to. But Sherrone Moore has been there for the past 6 years. He has been learning from Harbaugh. He has seen how Harbaugh wants Michigan to work and how Michigan works in the best capacity, which is, we're going to punch you in the teeth, and we're going to do it over and over and over again until you quit, essentially, is the way that they've been going about business since Harbaugh showed up. And I think it's going to be more of the same with Sherrone Moore. I think he is more than capable of having a team that is as hard-nosed as Jim Harbaugh had, partly because I think Jim Harbaugh just instilled that in him over the last 6 years. Now, Sherrone Moore has plenty of accomplishments behind him, where he was one of the most accomplished assistants in all of college football. He had multiple Joe Moore award-winning offensive lines when he was the O-line coach. He won 4 games as the interim coach a year ago, obviously, including Penn State and Ohio State, the 2 games that you got to win if you're a Michigan coach. So he, in my mind, has been a head coach for quite some time, or at least been ready to be a head coach for quite some time. but just has had the position of OC because the guy in front of him was one of the best coaches we have seen in quite some time in this sport. So I think he is now the big guy. He's now, taking over the reins. I think he's more than ready to go. The approach will be the exact same on offense. They're going to run the ball down your throat. It might even be more aggressive with Alex Orji taking over at quarterback. And then the defense is going to be just insane. This defense is really remarkable from top to bottom, even with all of the guys that they lost. I think they're just going to wreak havoc. So it's going to be the same Michigan. I promise you that. It'll have some ers and ahs in there. It won't be the same press conferences and that type of thing, but it'll be the same formula for winning, and I think Sharon Moore will handle it more than fine, to be totally honest with you. But let's move on to Ohio State, and let's talk about the man that has taken over spring ball in Jeremiah Smith. He has probably been the talk of the offseason after all of the coaching craziness with Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh and all of that stuff. Once we got into spring ball, it was Jeremiah Smith highlights all over your Twitter page pretty much every single day. This kid, pretty much from the get-go, was big time on theatrics because, obviously, if you remember at all, he had a very, very interesting recruitment. There were some signs that he might be signing with Miami down the stretch, so much so that during Ryan Day's press conference on signing day, he was asked about Jeremiah Smith, and actually he was told that Jeremiah Smith had finally signed with Ohio State. The dude almost collapsed to the ground, and some people thought that was a crazy reaction. Now that we've seen this kid play, it is not a crazy reaction. This kid is as talented as they come. And especially as being an 18-year-old, it's just insane what he can do on the football field. So he can get separation on intermediate and short routes, which is something that bigger built receivers tend to struggle with a little bit, but this kid doesn't seem to have much of a problem with it. He has some of the best hands I've seen as a freshman coming in, one of the best 50-50 guys on the team. I think he might be one of the best in the country next year, to be totally honest with you. I just think he's going to be as big a part of this team as anyone, and there's another part of this that kind of plays into why I think he could be the wide receiver one for Ohio State this upcoming year, and is the quarterback play. And obviously, I do think the quarterback play will be much better than it was a year ago. With Kyle McCord, I think it will be a much more consistent type of play, much more accurate week in, week out. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be up to the Ohio State standards, which is incredibly lofty, to be fair. But at the end of the day, I do think there's going to be some times where you're just going to need to throw it up and hope that someone goes and gets it, and Jeremiah Smith is going to be that guy. So I think this kid is going to take the world by storm, and I think despite Ohio State having the best wide receiver room in the country, this might be the guy in 2024. But let's move on to Oregon, and let's talk about what they can do in the Big Ten. I think they are fully ready to just take over in their first year. We talked about everything that has been in place, the elite transfer portal class, talent on both sides of the ball, depths on both sides of the ball, which is something they've kind of struggled with during the first part of Dan Lanning's time there. The staff has been really solid for a while with a couple of adjustments happening over offseason, but at the end of the day, this is a team that can handle everything that the Big Ten is going to throw at them, whether it's fantastic passing games, whether it's the physicality that a lot of people are worried some of these teams coming over can't handle. Oregon can handle it. They have tons of physicality across that entire team. The D-line is going to be among the best in the country and in the conference in particular. And then Dylan Gabriel, I think, is the best quarterback for this offense. I think he can just sling the ball out to all of the playmakers he will have around him. Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart leading the way there, obviously. But then the running backs are awesome. The O-line is one of the best in the country. It's all there for them, and I think they're ready to kick down the door. Now, will they is a big question mark, but at the end of the day, I think if you're looking at a team ready to fully take over their conference in year one, I think you look no further than the Oregon Ducks. But finally, let's finish it off with a Nebraska prediction, and let's talk about Dylan Raiola. He is a guy that has been massively covered over the last little bit, whether it was decommitting from Georgia and going to Nebraska, being the kind of prodigal son returning and the savior of the program coming back, that type of talk that was going on around him, and he's ready for a big-time freshman season. He's done incredible things during this spring, has been a really, really good piece for them. And, you're always a little bit worried when a freshman quarterback comes into the fray, but he's handled everything very, very well. I think this team overall is much better than people give them credit for, and will definitely be able to maybe surprise some people in some games throughout this year. Matt Rule has always taken a step forward year over year at every job he's been to. I expect that to happen again this year. I think it's possible he picks up even more momentum this year than he did in the past, second years with Temple and then with Baylor. They were making bowl games. I think they can win 8 to maybe even 9 games if things go really right. But Nebraska is going to be one of those teams that it feels like we've been wanting to talk about them for a long time, but they just haven't really given us a reason to. They keep losing these one-score games. They keep falling short of big-time expectations, so there's not really a big reason for them to be in the conversation in the Big Ten or in the national world. I think Dylan Raiola and this new Nebraska team will push them back into the conversation. Now, does that mean they're going to win the Big Ten? Does that mean they're going to go to the playoff? No, not by any means. But I do think when we go into the offseason and we start looking towards 2025, people are going to be looking at Nebraska not only as, a team that could make some noise, but a team that might just be a downright conference contender. So it'll be fascinating to watch this season unfold. I think this team is set up for more success than I think some people are expecting, but we'll find out what goes on with them. But that'll do it for this edition of the Overreaction segment. We will definitely get to more of that as the week goes on, because there's tons across the country that you can pull from. So that's definitely a fun segment that we'll continue to do. But we're going to take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Top 10 Tuesday. Today we're going to do the biggest commitments of the spring portal cycle. There are some big-time guys that came off the board. Want to break down who I think has the biggest impact on their team, who I think was the biggest pickup, whether it's a position of need or just the outright talent of a player. So we'll break down that right after this, so stick with us.